The hangar doors rolled open with a metallic groan that echoed across the tarmac. Sunlight poured in, cutting through the shadows and illuminating the sleek body of the F/A-18 Super Hornet like a spotlight on a stage. My father stood 15 feet away, arms crossed, that familiar smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. The same expression he'd worn when I told him I was joining the Air Force. The same one he had when I said I wanted to fly fighters. The same dismissive curl of his lip that said, without words, "You're dreaming too big for someone like you." My mother lingered behind him, clutching her purse with both hands, eyes darting between me and the aircraft as if she didn't know which one was more dangerous. My brother Kyle stood off to the side, checking his phone, barely interested. But the man standing beside my father, that was different. For stars gleamed on his shoulder boards, sharp and unmistakable even from a distance. General Marcus Whitfield, a living legend in military aviation, a man whose name alone commanded rooms to go silent. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. And my father had no idea who he was talking to when he said, loud enough for half the hangar crew to hear, pointing at the jet behind me, "Bet she's never even sat in the cockpit of one of those things. Probably just pushes papers and calls it serving." I felt my jaw tighten. My hands, which had steadied through turbulence at 30,000 feet and held firm during combat simulations, wanted to curl into fists. But I didn't move. I just stood there in my flight suit, name tape across my chest, call signs stitched onto my shoulder, Phoenix, and waited. The general turned slowly toward my father. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. He looked at me, then back at my father, and in a voice that was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority, he said, "This is her aircraft. Captain Brennan is one of the finest pilots in this squadron. She's flown more combat hours than most men twice her age." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Kyle finally looked up from his phone. The crew members nearby, those who'd been pretending not to listen, all stopped what they were doing. And me, I just stood there, not smug, not victorious, just still. Because I'd spent years learning that the loudest response isn't always words. That moment, right there in Hangar 7 on a blistering June afternoon at Nellis Air Force Base, was the first time my father ever looked at me and didn't see a mistake. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been running diagnostics on the same Super Hornet when my phone buzzed in my locker. I almost didn't check it. Flight prep was strict, no distractions, no interruptions. But something made me glance at the screen. A message from my mother. Short, clipped, the way she always wrote when she was uncomfortable. "Your father wants you to come to the air show next month. Thinks it would be good for the family. Kyle will be there. We haven't seen you in 2 years." I read it twice, standing there in my flight suit with the hum of machinery around me and the faint smell of jet fuel in the air. 2 years. She said it like it was my fault. Like I'd been the one who stopped calling. Like I was the one who hung up when conversations got too uncomfortable. I typed back a single word. "Okay." Then I locked my phone and went back to work, because the aircraft didn't care about family drama, and neither did the mission. The air show was a big deal. Nellis hosted it every year, a massive public event where civilians could tour the base, watch demonstrations, meet pilots, and see the machinery up close. For most people, it was entertainment. For us, it was a showcase of precision, skill, and years of training distilled into 15-minute performances that made it all look easy. I'd been assigned a demo flight. Just a standard routine, high-speed passes, a few tactical maneuvers, nothing I hadn't done 100 times. But knowing my family would be there added a different kind of pressure. Not the kind that comes from flying. The kind that comes from wanting people to see you and knowing they've spent years looking right past you. I grew up in Billings, Montana, in a house that smelled like motor oil and disappointment. My father, Frank Brennan, owned an auto repair shop that had been in the family for 30 years. Brennan Auto and Diesel Repair, the sign out front said in faded red letters. It was his kingdom. Engines, transmissions, axles, Anything with bolts and torque specs, that was his language. My brother Kyle spoke it fluently. By the time he was 16, he could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. My father loved that. He'd clap Kyle on the back, grinning, and say, "That's my boy, got grease in his veins." I'd be sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, and it was like I didn't exist. I tried once. I was 14. I asked if I could help in the shop. My father looked at me like I'd just suggested we burn the place down. "Girls don't belong under cars, Danny," he said. "You'll get dirty." I told him I didn't mind. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was the kind that said, "You don't even know what you're asking for." So I stopped asking. I found other ways to feel useful. I joined the Civil Air Patrol, a youth program that taught basic aerospace education and search and rescue skills. I loved it. Loved the structure, the uniforms, the idea that the sky wasn't a ceiling but a doorway. My instructor, a retired Air Force colonel named Rita Vasquez, saw something in me. She'd pull me aside after meetings and say, "You've got good instincts, kid. Ever think about flying for real?" I hadn't. Not seriously. But the seed was planted. When I told my father I wanted to join the Air Force, he was changing the oil on a Ford pickup. He didn't even look up. "The Air Force," he repeated flatly. "Yeah," I said. "I want to be a pilot." He set down the wrench, wiped his hands on a rag, and finally looked at me. His eyes were hard. "You think they're just gonna hand you a jet because you ask nice?" I swallowed. "I'll work for it." He snorted. "You don't even know what work is." My mother was in the kitchen when I told her. She was folding laundry, her hands moving methodically, creasing shirts with the same precision she'd used my whole life to keep everything neat and non-confrontational. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "Your father thinks it's a phase." "It's not," I said. "I know," she replied, still folding. "That's what worries me." I left for the academy 2 months after graduation. My father didn't come to see me off. Kyle did, barely. He gave me an awkward side hug and said, "Good luck or whatever." My mother cried, but she didn't try to stop me. I think part of her was relieved. One less person to tiptoe around. The academy was brutal. Not just the physical training, though that nearly broke me more than once, but the constant pressure to prove I belonged. I was one of 3 women in my flight training class. The instructors didn't go easy on anyone, but the scrutiny felt sharper when you were female. Every mistake was examined twice. Every success was downplayed or attributed to luck. I learned to fly in a T-6 Texan, a turboprop trainer that felt like a wild horse the first time I took the stick. My hands shook. My instructor, a stone-faced captain named Hargrove, sat behind me and said, "If you're scared, get out now." I wasn't scared. I was terrified. But I also felt something else. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's expectations. I was just trying to stay airborne. I soloed after 30 hours. The tradition was that your classmates would cut your shirt and spray you down with a hose. They soaked me until I was shivering, laughing, gasping for air. Captain Hargrove handed me my wings, those small silver pins that meant everything, and said, "You earned these, Brennan. Don't let anyone tell you different." I kept those wings in a small wooden box my grandfather had made. He'd been a mechanic too, like my father, but he'd also loved airplanes. He used to take me to the local airstrip when I was little, back before he got too sick to drive. We'd sit on the hood of his truck and watch Cessnas take off, and he'd tell me stories about the P-51 Mustangs he'd worked on during the war. He never flew one, but he understood them, loved them the way some people love music or art. He died when I was 12. At his funeral, my father didn't cry. He just stood there, stoic, staring at the casket like it was another engine he couldn't fix. But I cried. I cried because Grandpa Joe was the only person who ever looked at me and saw potential instead of inconvenience. After the academy, I went to fighter training. That's where things got real. The washout rate was high. The stakes were higher. You weren't just learning to fly anymore. You were learning to fight, to think 3 moves ahead, to make split-second decisions at supersonic speeds while pulling GS that made your vision tunnel and your body feel like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I struggled at first. My landings were sloppy. My situational awareness lagged. I got chewed out more times than I could count. But I didn't quit. I stayed late, ran extra sims, studied targeting systems until my eyes burned. Slowly, painfully, I got better. My call sign came during a training exercise. We were running a simulated dogfight, 2 versus 2. My wingman got tagged out early, which meant I was alone against 2 aggressors. I should have retreated, played it safe. Instead, I went offensive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I used the sun, terrain masking, every trick I'd learned, and managed to get behind both of them. I didn't win, they eventually cornered me, but I put up enough of a fight that my squadron leader said, "Damn, Brennan, you don't stay down, do you?" Someone in the back yelled, "She's like a phoenix," and the name stuck. Phoenix. I liked it. It felt earned. By the time I graduated and got my assignment to Nellis, I'd logged over 500 flight hours and earned a reputation as someone who didn't quit. I wasn't the flashiest pilot. I wasn't the one pulling crazy stunts in the break room or talking big. I was steady. Reliable. The kind of pilot you wanted on your wing when things went sideways. But none of that mattered to my father. When I called home after getting my assignment, he answered on the 4th ring. "Yeah," he said, like I was interrupting something important. "Hey, Dad," I said. "I got stationed at Nellis. I'm flying F-18s now." There was a pause. "That's in Nevada, right?" "Yeah." He grunted. "Well, good for you, I guess." Then he handed the phone to my mother. I stopped calling after that. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. You can only reach out so many times before you realize the other person isn't reaching back. My mother would text occasionally. Short updates. "Kyle got promoted at the dealership. Your father's back is acting up again. We're thinking about getting a new dog." I'd respond politely, briefly. That was the extent of our relationship. Surface-level pleasantries that didn't risk going deeper. So when she sent that message about the air show, I was surprised. Not that they wanted to come. My father loved anything with engines. But that he specifically wanted me there. That felt different. Maybe he was finally curious. Maybe he wanted to see what I actually did. Or maybe, I thought cynically, he just wanted to show Kyle the jets. Either way, I said yes. Because part of me, the part that was still 14 years old asking to help in the shop, wanted him to see. Not to prove him wrong. Just to be seen. The week leading up to the air show was intense. We ran rehearsals daily, tightening formations, timing sequences down to the second. The demo flight was choreographed like a ballet, every maneuver designed to look effortless while requiring absolute precision. One mistake, one miscalculation, and you could end up in a smoking crater. My squadron leader, Lieutenant Commander James Park, flew lead. He was calm under pressure, almost unnervingly so, the kind of guy who could narrate an emergency landing like he was ordering coffee. We'd flown together for 2 years, and I trusted him completely. He knew I had family coming, and the night before the show, he found me in the ready room staring at my flight plan for the 100th time. "You good, Phoenix?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "Just running numbers." He walked over, glanced at the paper. "Numbers look fine. It's not the numbers you're worried about." I finally looked at him. "That obvious?" He smiled. You've been wound tighter than a spring all week. Family stuff gets to everyone. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. My dad doesn't think much of what I do. Thinks flying is just for show. Park raised an eyebrow. He say that? Not in those words. But yeah. Park nodded slowly. Then show him different. Not for him. For you. I thought about that all night. Not for him. For you. It was good advice. But easier said than done when the person you're trying not to impress is also the person whose approval you've wanted your entire life. The morning of the air show, I woke up before dawn. My quarters were quiet, the kind of silence that only exists in the hour before the world starts moving. I made coffee, strong and black, and sat by the window watching the sky turn from ink to violet to pale orange. Somewhere out there, my family was probably still asleep in a hotel room, my father snoring, my mother reading, Kyle scrolling through his phone. I wondered what they expected to see. Probably not much. Maybe they thought I'd be standing around in a uniform answering questions, shaking hands, playing the part. They didn't know I was flying. I hadn't told them. I wanted it to be a surprise. Or maybe I just didn't want to hear my father's skepticism beforehand. I put on my flight suit slowly, methodically. Every zipper, every Velcro strap, every patch in its place. I checked my gear twice. Helmet, gloves, checklist, knee board. Then I stood in front of the mirror for a moment, looking at the woman staring back. Captain Danielle Brennan. Call sign Phoenix. Fighter pilot. Not a mechanic's daughter. Not a disappointment. Just a pilot. I grabbed my grandfather's watch from the nightstand, the old aviator's watch with the cracked leather band that he'd worn every day of his life. I slipped it into my pocket. For luck. For memory. For the man who believed I could fly before I ever left the ground. By the time I got to the flight line, the base was already buzzing. Crowds were forming near the flight demonstration area. Families with kids, veterans in old unit caps, aviation enthusiasts with cameras. The energy was electric. I walked past them all, head down, focused, making my way to hangar 7 where my aircraft waited. That's when I saw them. My family. Standing near the hangar entrance, looking around like tourists. My father in his best jeans and a polo shirt that still somehow looked wrinkled. My mother in a floral blouse, sunglasses perched on her head. Kyle in a t-shirt and cargo shorts, hands in his pockets. They hadn't seen me yet. I could have walked past, kept going, avoided the whole interaction until after the flight. But something made me stop. I took a breath and walked toward them. My mother noticed me first. Her face lit up, surprised. "Danny," she said, waving. "Oh my goodness, look at you." She hurried over and hugged me, the kind of hug that was tight but brief, like she wasn't sure how long to hold on. "You look so official," she said, stepping back, smoothing my shoulder like she used to when I was little. My father didn't move. He just looked me up and down, taking in the flight suit, the patches, the name tape. "So this is what you do," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Flat. Unimpressed. "Yeah, Dad," I said evenly. "This is what I do." Kyle gave me a nod. "Sup, Danny." "Hey, Kyle." My mother glanced between us, sensing the tension, trying to smooth it over the way she always did. "We're so excited to be here," she said brightly. "Your father's been looking forward to seeing the planes. He loves anything that flies." I almost laughed at that. He loves anything with an engine, I thought. But he never loved that I wanted to fly them. We walked toward the hangar together, my mother chattering about the drive, the hotel, the crowds. My father stayed quiet, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the jets on the tarmac like he was evaluating their worth. Kyle was back on his phone. And then we turned the corner, and there it was. My aircraft. Hangar 7, Bay 3. The Super Hornet gleaming under the overhead lights, tail number 307 painted in bold white letters. My name stenciled just below the canopy rail. Captain D. Brennan. Phoenix. My mother gasped softly. "Oh, Danny, is that," she started, but my father cut her off. "That's a nice-looking machine," he said, walking closer, hands still in his pockets. "Bet it takes a hell of a crew to keep one of these running." I swallowed the irritation rising in my throat. "It does," I said. "We have great maintenance teams." He nodded, still looking at the jet, not at me. "So what do you do? Coordinate the flights? Logistics?" Before I could answer, a voice came from behind us. Smooth, commanding, unmistakable. "Actually, she flies it." We all turned. General Marcus Whitfield stood 10 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, for stars glinting in the morning sun. He walked forward with the kind of presence that didn't need introduction. My father's face went pale. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Kyle actually put his phone away. The general stopped beside me, glanced at my family, then back at my father. And that's when he said it. The words that would replay in my mind for years. "This is her aircraft. Captain Brennan is one of the finest pilots in this squadron. She's flown more combat hours than most men twice her age." The silence that followed was deafening. My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He started, but nothing came out. The general smiled faintly, the kind of smile that was polite but carried weight. "You must be very proud," he said. Then he turned to me. "Captain, pre-flight brief is in 20 minutes. "Yes, sir," I said, snapping to attention. He nodded once and walked away, leaving my family standing there like statues. My mother was the first to speak. "Danny," she whispered, her voice trembling. You fly that?" I looked at her, then at my father, then at Kyle. "Yeah, Mom," I said quietly. "I fly that. And in 2 hours, I'm going to take it up in front of 20,000 people and show them what it can do." My father still hadn't moved. His face was red, whether from embarrassment or something else, I couldn't tell. Kyle let out a low whistle. "That's insane," he said, and for once, it didn't sound dismissive. It sounded genuine. My father finally found his voice. "You never said," he started. I cut him off gently but firmly. "You never asked." The words hung there, simple and true. He looked down, jaw working, hands tightening into fists and releasing. My mother touched his arm, but he shook her off, not angrily, just needing space. I didn't wait for a response. "I have to go," I said. "You can watch from the spectator area. There's a good view from the south bleachers." My mother nodded quickly. "We'll be there. We'll be watching." "I know," I said. Then I turned and walked toward the ready room, leaving them standing in front of my aircraft, the one my father didn't think I'd ever touch, let alone command. As I walked away, I heard my mother's voice, quiet but urgent. "Frank, did you hear what that general said?" And my father, even quieter. "Yeah, Judy. I heard." I didn't look back. I had a flight to prepare for. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't flying to prove anything to anyone. I was flying because it was mine. The sky, the aircraft, the moment. All mine. The ready room smelled like coffee and jet fuel, a combination that had become as familiar to me as breathing. 6 other pilots sat scattered around the space, some reviewing flight cards, others joking to burn off pre-show nerves. Lieutenant Commander Park sat in the corner, eyes closed, headphones on, running through his mental checklist. He did that before every flight, a personal ritual that kept him centered. I grabbed my helmet from my locker and sat down, pulling out my knee board to review the sequence one more time. High-speed pass at 400 knots, pull up into a vertical climb, roll out at 8,000 feet, then come around for the tactical demonstration. It was straightforward on paper. In reality, it required timing so precise that a half-second delay could throw off the entire show. My hands were steady as I traced the flight path with my finger, but my mind kept drifting back to the hangar. To my father's face when the general spoke. To the way he'd stood there, frozen, unable to form words. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part, a smaller, quieter part, just felt sad. Because even now, even after everything, I still wished he'd been proud without needing a 4-star general to tell him to be. Park opened his eyes and caught me staring at nothing. "Phoenix, you with us?" "Yeah," I said, shaking off the thoughts. Just visualizing. He stood, stretching his arms over his head until his joints cracked. "Good. Because I need you sharp up there. The crowd's gonna be huge, and half of them are gonna have cameras pointed at us." "No pressure," I said dryly. He grinned. "Exactly. No pressure." The brief started 10 minutes later. Squadron Leader Hayes stood at the front, a projector displaying our flight path on the wall behind him. He was a veteran with over 3,000 flight hours and a calm demeanor that made even the most complex missions feel manageable. "All right, people," he said, pointer in hand. "Weather is clear, winds at 8 knots from the southwest, visibility unlimited. Perfect conditions. Let's not waste them." He walked through the sequence step by step, emphasizing timing and separation. We'd be flying in a loose formation, staggered to give the crowd the best view while maintaining safe distances. My slot was third in the lineup, right after Park and Captain Torres, a hotshot from Texas who flew like he had something to prove. Hayes pointed to the display. "Brennan, your pull-up needs to be clean. Last rehearsal you were a half-second late on the roll." "I know, sir," I said. "I'll tighten it." He nodded. "I trust you will." After the brief, we walked out to the flight line together, helmets under our arms, the sun already climbing toward brutal. The crowd noise was a distant hum, thousands of voices blending into a low roar. I could see the bleachers packed with people, kids waving flags, veterans saluting as we passed. It was the kind of moment that should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was focus. My crew chief, a tech sergeant named Ruiz, was waiting by my aircraft. He'd been with me since I arrived at Nellis, a meticulous guy who treated every plane like it was his own child. "Morning, Captain," he said, handing me the maintenance log. "She's ready to go. Pre-flight checks are green across the board." I scanned the log quickly, noting fuel levels, hydraulics, avionics. Everything looked solid. "Thanks, Ruiz," I said. He stepped back, giving the jet a once-over with his eyes. "Bring her back clean, ma'am." "Always do." I climbed the ladder, each step deliberate, and lowered myself into the cockpit. The seat molded around me, familiar and tight. I strapped in, 5-point harness clicking into place, and began my pre-flight routine. Canopy check, ejection seat armed, radios online. My fingers moved through the switches with practiced efficiency, muscle memory built over hundreds of flights. The HUD flickered to life, displaying altitude, airspeed, heading. I tapped the multifunction display, confirming weapon systems were safe. This was a demo, not a combat flight, but the procedures were the same. Ground crew gave me the signal. I fired up the engines, the twin turbofans spooling with a rising whine that vibrated through the airframe. The sound was visceral, powerful, the kind of raw mechanical force that made your chest tighten. I ran through the engine checks, watching the gauges, listening to the rhythm. Everything nominal. I keyed my radio. "Tower, Phoenix. Request taxi. Phoenix, Tower. Cleared to taxi runway 21. Wind 090 at 8. Altimeter 3012. Copy, cleared to taxi 21, I replied. I released the brakes and eased the throttle forward, the jet rolling smoothly across the tarmac. Ahead of me, Park and Torres were already positioning at the hold short line. I fell in behind them, keeping spacing tight. The crowd was visible now through the canopy, a sea of faces pressed against the fence line, phones and cameras held high. I wondered if my family was out there somewhere, watching. My father with his arms crossed, skeptical even now. My mother clutching her purse, nervous. Kyle probably filming the whole thing for social media. Tower cleared us for takeoff. Park went first, accelerating down the runway in a blur of heat and exhaust. 10 seconds later, Torres followed. Then it was my turn. I lined up on the centerline, throttle at idle, brakes locked. I took one breath, slow and deliberate. Then I pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared, thrust pinning me back into the seat as the jet surged ahead. The runway lights blurred past, faster and faster, the airspeed indicator climbing. 80 knots. 100. 140. At 160, I pulled back on the stick, and the nose lifted. The wheels left the ground, and suddenly I was airborne, climbing into the open sky. The noise of the crowd vanished. The world narrowed to the HUD, the horizon, the radio chatter in my ears. Tower, Phoenix airborne. Roger, Phoenix. Contact departure. I switched frequencies, checked my position, and banked left to join the formation. Park and Torres were already in position, two gray shapes against the bright blue. I slid into place behind them, adjusting throttle to match their speed. We climbed to 5,000 feet, leveling off in a wide arc around the airfield. Lead, Phoenix, I called. In position. Copy, Phoenix, Park replied. Stand by for show start. The next few minutes were choreographed chaos. We broke formation, each peeling off in different directions to set up for our individual passes. My heart rate was steady, breathing controlled, hands loose on the stick. This was what I'd trained for. Not the spectacle, but the precision. The discipline to execute under pressure. I rolled inverted, checking my position relative to the field. The crowd was a tiny smear of color below, the runway a thin line cutting through the desert. I pulled through, leveling out at 2,000 feet, lining up for my high-speed pass. Tower called the clearance. Phoenix, cleared for demonstration pass, runway 21. Maintain 500 feet AGL. Copy, cleared for demo pass, 500 AGL, I confirmed. I pushed the throttles to military power, not full afterburner yet, just enough to build speed. The jet accelerated smoothly, the airframe shuddering slightly as we punched through 300 knots. I dropped to 500 feet, skimming over the desert floor, the ground rushing past in a tan blur. Ahead, the airfield appeared, the crowd a dark mass along the flight line. I centered on the runway, lined up perfectly, and lit the burners. The kick was immediate and violent. The engines screamed, twin cones of fire erupting behind me as the afterburners ignited. The jet rocketed forward, 400 knots, 420, 450. The world compressed into a tunnel of speed and sound. I flashed over the runway at 500 feet, the crowd directly below, and then I pulled. Hard. The nose came up, gravity slamming me into the seat with crushing force. 6GS, 7, the G-suit inflating around my legs and abdomen, squeezing to keep blood in my brain. My vision tunneled, the edges going gray, but I kept pulling, driving the aircraft vertical. The sky filled the canopy, infinite and blue, and I rolled, twisting the jet through 360 degrees as we climbed through 8,000 feet. My breathing came in short, controlled grunts, fighting the G-load, waiting for the pressure to ease. At the top of the climb, I eased off, letting the nose fall back toward the horizon. The GS dropped away, my vision clearing, and I exhaled hard. Phoenix, clean pull, Park called over the radio. Nice work. Copy, I replied, banking around to set up for the next pass. The rest of the demonstration blurred together in a sequence of maneuvers, each one flowing into the next. Low altitude turns, high G brakes, formation rejoins. Every move was calculated, timed, rehearsed. But up here, in the cockpit, it didn't feel rehearsed. It felt alive. The jet responded to every input, every thought translated into motion. This was where I belonged. Not on the ground explaining myself, but up here doing what I was trained to do. After the final pass, we reformed and flew a missing man formation, a tribute to the pilots who didn't come home. Park led, Torres on his right wing, me on the left. We flew straight and level for 10 seconds, then I pulled up and away, climbing alone into the empty sky while the others continued on. It was a solemn moment, a reminder that for all the spectacle and precision, this profession carried weight. Real weight. I rejoined the pattern and brought the jet around for landing. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by the focus required for a clean touchdown. I dropped the gear, felt the reassuring thunk as the wheels locked, and lowered the hook. The runway stretched ahead, shimmering in the heat. I cut power, descending through 500 feet, 300, 100. The wheels kissed the pavement with barely a bump, and I deployed the drag chute, the jet decelerating smoothly as I guided it off the runway. Ground crew directed me back to the hangar, and I taxied slowly, the engines winding down from their high whine to a low rumble. As I approached my parking spot, I saw them. My family, standing near the hangar entrance, exactly where I'd left them. But this time, they weren't alone. General Whitfield was there too, hands clasped behind his back, speaking with my father. I shut down the engines and popped the canopy, the desert heat rushing in like a wall. Ruiz was already climbing the ladder, grinning. "Hell of a show, Captain," he said. That vertical was textbook. I unstrapped, pulling off my helmet, my hair matted with sweat. "It felt good," I said, and meant it. He helped me out of the cockpit, and I climbed down, legs shaky from the G-forces and adrenaline come-down. The ground felt strange after being airborne, too solid, too still. I walked toward my family, still in my flight suit, helmet tucked under my arm. My mother saw me first. She was crying, not sobbing, just quiet tears streaming down her face. She didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "Oh, Danny," she whispered. I had no idea. I hugged her back, feeling the tension I'd carried for years start to crack. "I know, Mom." Kyle was next. He didn't hug me, just clapped me on the shoulder, his expression somewhere between awe and disbelief. "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen," he said. "I mean, seriously." I smiled. "Thanks, Kyle." My father stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. The general had stepped aside, giving us space, but his presence lingered. My father looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He started, then stopped, shaking his head. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said quietly. He looked down, scuffing his boot against the pavement. "When I saw you in that cockpit," he said slowly, his voice rough. "When I saw you take off like that." He paused, struggling. I realized I'd been wrong about a lot of things. My mother reached over, squeezing his arm. "Frank," she said gently. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm proud of you, Danny," he said, the words coming out stiff and uncomfortable, like he was learning a new language. "I should have said it a long time ago. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd feel. But standing there, hearing him finally say it, all I felt was tired. Tired and, strangely, at peace. "Thanks, Dad," I said. "That means a lot." General Whitfield approached then, his timing impeccable. "Captain Brennan, outstanding demonstration," he said. The precision on that vertical climb was exceptional. "Thank you, sir," I said, snapping to attention. He waved me at ease. "I was just telling your father about the deployment last year. The one where you provided close air support for the ground team in the Helmand province." My father's head snapped up. "Deployment?" The general nodded. Captain Brennan flew 32 combat missions in a 6-month rotation. She received a commendation for actions under fire. My father stared at me, his face pale. You were in combat? I kept my voice even. Yes, Dad. I was. He looked like he'd been punched. You never said. You never asked, I repeated, but this time there was no edge to it. Just fact. The general glanced between us, reading the room. Well, he said, I'll let you all catch up. Captain, debrief is at 1600. Don't be late. Yes, sir, I said. He nodded once and walked away, leaving us standing in the shadow of my aircraft. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The noise of the air show continued around us, jets overhead, announcements crackling through loudspeakers, but in our little bubble, it was quiet. Finally, my mother broke the silence. Danny, sweetheart, we'd love to take you to dinner tonight. If you're free. I hesitated, glancing at my father. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see dismissal or disappointment. I saw regret. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. Yeah, Mom, I said. Dinner sounds good. We walked together toward the parking area, my family on one side, my jet on the other. And as I glanced back at the Super Hornet sitting there in the sun, tail number gleaming, my name stenciled below the canopy, I realized something. I didn't need my father's approval anymore. I'd spent years chasing it, trying to prove I was worthy of his respect. But somewhere between the academy and today, I'd stopped needing it. I'd found my own worth. And that, more than any words he could say, was what finally set me free. Still, as we reached his truck and he opened the door for my mother, he paused. Turned back to look at me. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, he said quietly. What you were doing. What you were becoming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He climbed into the truck, and I watched them drive away, my mother waving through the window, Kyle texting in the back seat. I stood there for a moment longer, breathing in the desert air, the smell of jet fuel and dust and possibility. Then I turned and headed back to the ready room. I had a debrief to attend, a flight suit to change out of, and a life to get back to. A life that was mine. Built on my terms. Flown at my speed. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The debrief lasted 40 minutes. We sat in the operations room, flight suits still damp with sweat, going through each segment of the demonstration frame by frame. Hayes pulled up the video feed from the ground cameras, and we watched ourselves from the crowd's perspective. My vertical climb looked cleaner than I'd thought, the roll crisp and centered. Torres had been a touch wide on his rejoin, and Park's final approach had floated slightly, but overall it was solid work. Hayes paused the video on a shot of all three aircraft in formation, vapor trail streaming behind us against the cloudless sky. That's the shot that'll be in the papers tomorrow, he said. Good work, people. He dismissed us with a nod, and we filed out, peeling off toward the locker rooms. I showered quickly, letting the cold water wash away the grime and tension, then changed into my service uniform. The flight suit had served its purpose. Now it was time to be a daughter, if I could remember how. The restaurant my mother had chosen was a small Italian place off base, the kind with checkered tablecloths and breadsticks in a basket. I arrived 20 minutes late, traffic on the access road backed up from the air show. When I walked in, I spotted them immediately in a corner booth. My father sat facing the door, my mother beside him, Kyle across from them scrolling through his phone. They looked out of place somehow, stiff and formal in a casual setting. My mother waved when she saw me, her smile bright but nervous. I navigated through the tables, past families still buzzing about the day's events, and slid into the booth next to Kyle. Sorry I'm late, I said. Traffic was brutal. My mother reached across the table, squeezing my hand. We just got here ourselves. She gestured to the menus. We haven't ordered yet. Wanted to wait for you. The waitress appeared, a college-aged girl with her hair in a ponytail. She took our drink orders, sweet tea for my parents, water for me, some craft beer for Kyle, and disappeared into the kitchen. An awkward silence settled over the table. My father stared at his menu like it contained classified information. Kyle put his phone face down but kept glancing at it. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. So, she said finally, that was quite a show today. I smiled politely. Thanks. We've been practicing for weeks. She nodded eagerly. It showed. Everything was so precise. Kyle looked up. Dude, that thing you did where you went straight up and spun around, that was insane. How many GS were you pulling? About 7 on the climb, I said. The suit helps, but yeah, it's intense. He shook his head. I can't even imagine. Like, I get dizzy on roller coasters. My father hadn't said anything yet. He sat there, hands folded on the table, jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't know how to swallow. Finally, he cleared his throat. That general, he said. Whitfield. He said you were in combat. I met his eyes. Yeah, Dad. I was. Where? Afghanistan. Helmand Province, mostly. Some missions in other regions. He nodded slowly, processing. And you never mentioned it. There was no accusation in his voice, just confusion, maybe even hurt. I didn't know how to bring it up, I said carefully. We don't really talk much. He flinched at that, a small movement, but I caught it. My mother jumped in, her voice too bright. Well, we're talking now. And we want to hear about it. About everything. What's it like, flying one of those jets? I took a sip of water, buying time to figure out where to start. It's hard to describe, I said. When you're up there, everything else just falls away. It's just you and the machine and the mission. There's a clarity to it. A purpose. My father leaned forward slightly. You said you flew combat missions. What does that mean exactly? It means providing air support for troops on the ground, I said. Sometimes it's reconnaissance, sometimes it's close air support during firefights. You're up there watching, waiting, and when they call you in, you have seconds to make decisions that can save lives or end them. The table went quiet. Kyle's eyes were wide. You've actually, fired on people? I hesitated. This wasn't something I talked about, not even with other pilots unless we'd been through it together. But my family was looking at me, really looking, and I realized they'd never asked before. Not because they didn't care, maybe, but because they hadn't wanted to know. Or hadn't known how to ask. Yes, I said simply. I have. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Oh, Danny. Are you? She paused, searching for the right words. Are you okay? I'm okay, Mom, I said, and meant it. It's part of the job. You train for it, you prepare for it, and when it happens, you do what needs to be done. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded, her eyes glistening. The waitress returned with our drinks and took our food orders. The interruption gave everyone a moment to reset. When she left, my father spoke again, his voice quieter now. I owe you an apology, he said, the words coming out slow and deliberate. For a lot of things. But especially for today. For what I said in that hangar. I shrugged, trying to play it off. It's fine, Dad. It's not fine, he said, cutting me off. He looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of working on engines. When you told me you wanted to join the Air Force, I thought you were running away. From home. From the family business. From me. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me had been running, maybe. Running towards something bigger than the life mapped out in Billings, the life where I'd always be Frank Brennan's daughter, the one who didn't fit. But I hadn't been running from him, not exactly. Just from the smallness of his expectations. I wasn't running, I said carefully. I was reaching. My mother smiled at that, sad but understanding. Your grandfather used to say the same thing, she said. That some people are built to stay and some are built to reach. I'd forgotten that. My father glanced at her, then back at me. He was proud of you, you know, he said. Your grandpa used to tell everyone at the VFW that his granddaughter was gonna fly jets someday. I didn't believe him. Thought he was just being optimistic. I felt a lump rising in my throat. He told you that? My father nodded. All the time. After you left for the academy, he'd bring it up every Sunday. Frank, he'd say, that girl's gonna do something special. Mark my words. And I'd just nod and change the subject because I didn't want to think about you being gone. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't want to admit that maybe he was right and I was wrong. Across the table, my mother was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Kyle looked uncomfortable, the way he always did with emotional conversations, but he stayed quiet. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Grandpa Joe was the only one who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, I said. When he died, I almost quit the academy. Thought maybe everyone was right, maybe I didn't belong there. But then I remembered something he told me once. He said the sky doesn't care who you are or where you come from. It only cares if you're brave enough to meet it on its terms. My father's jaw tightened, and I could see him fighting to keep his composure. Sounds like something he'd say, he muttered. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years and unspoken words pressing down on the table. Then the food arrived, and we focused on eating, grateful for the distraction. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Kyle talked about his job at the dealership, how he was being considered for a management position. My mother mentioned her garden, the tomatoes coming in heavy this year. My father talked about the shop, how business was steady but the competition from chain stores was getting tougher. I listened, asked questions, played the part of the engaged daughter. But part of me was still in the cockpit, still feeling the stick in my hand and the GS pressing me into the seat. That was where I made sense. Here, in this booth with red sauce and small talk, I felt like I was performing a role I'd never quite learned. After dinner, we walked out into the parking lot together. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. My father stopped by his truck, keys in hand. We're staying in town tonight, he said. Driving back tomorrow morning. I nodded. Safe travels. He hesitated, then stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. It was awkward, his arms stiff around my shoulders, but it was real. Take care of yourself, Danny, he said quietly. And if you ever need anything, you call. You hear me? I hugged him back, feeling the unfamiliarity of it, the strange comfort. I will, Dad, I said. He released me and climbed into the truck. My mother hugged me next, longer and tighter. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, she whispered. I always have been. Even when I didn't say it. I know, Mom, I said, though I hadn't known, not really. Kyle gave me a fist bump, still not the hugging type. Seriously, though, he said. That was badass today. Next time you're home, I'm telling everyone my sister's a fighter pilot. Next time I'm home, I repeated, the words feeling strange. Yeah. Maybe. I watched them drive away, taillights disappearing into the evening traffic, and stood there for a moment in the empty parking lot. The air was cooling, the heat of the day finally breaking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Park. Drinks at the O Club. You coming? I typed back. Be there in 20. Then I climbed into my car, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought used 3 years ago, and headed back to base. The officers' club was packed, as it always was after a successful air show. Pilots, crew chiefs, support staff, everyone unwinding after a long day. I found Park at a corner table with Torres and a few others from the squadron. They waved me over, and someone shoved a beer into my hand before I'd even sat down. Phoenix, Torres said, raising his bottle. That vertical today was a thing of beauty. I clinked my bottle against his. You weren't so bad yourself, hotshot. We drank and talked, the conversation flowing easily the way it always did with people who understood the job. We didn't have to explain the adrenaline, the precision, the constant weight of responsibility. We just lived it together. At some point, Hayes walked over, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Brennan," he said, pulling up a chair. "Hell of a day." "Yes, sir," I said. He took a sip, studying me. "I saw your family in the hangar." "That your dad the general was talking to?" "Yeah, that was him." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Must have been something, having them see you fly." "It was," I said, and left it at that. He didn't press, just raised his glass. "To family reunions and clean landings." "To clean landings," we echoed, and drank. The night wore on, and slowly people filtered out, heading home or back to their quarters. Eventually, it was just me and Park, sitting in the near-empty club, nursing the last of our beers. "You good?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Yeah," I said. "Just processing." He nodded. "Big day." "Big day," I agreed. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me with that knowing expression he got sometimes. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you've been carrying your family around in your cockpit for years. And today you finally set them down." I considered that, turning it over in my mind. "Maybe," I said. "Feels weird, though. Like I don't know what to do without that weight." He smiled. "You fly, Phoenix. That's what you do. Simple as that." "Simple as that," I repeated, though we both knew it was never that simple. Still, there was truth in it. I'd spent so long trying to prove something, to someone, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be good at what I did because I was good at it. Not because I needed validation. Not because I was running from something. Just because the sky called and I answered. We finished our drinks and walked out together into the night. The base was quiet, most of the buildings dark except for the security lights along the flight line. In the distance, I could see the silhouettes of the jets, my jet among them, waiting for tomorrow's mission. "You ever think about what you'd do if you couldn't fly anymore?" Park asked suddenly. I glanced at him. "Where's that coming from?" "Just curious," he said. "We all think about it eventually. The day the flight dock grounds us or the day we realize our reflexes aren't what they used to be." I shook my head. "I try not to think about it. Because honestly, I don't know what I'd do. This is all I've ever wanted." He nodded. "Yeah. I get that." We reached the parking lot, and he stopped by his car. "For what it's worth," he said, "you're one of the best pilots I've ever flown with. And I've flown with a lot of people." I felt my throat tighten. "Thanks, Park. That means a lot." He grinned. "Don't let it go to your head, Phoenix. You still owe me a beer from that bet last month." I laughed. "I didn't lose that bet." "You absolutely lost that bet," he said, climbing into his car. "See you at 0600. "See you then," I said. I drove back to my quarters slowly, windows down, letting the cool night air wash over me. When I got inside, I tossed my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch. My body ached in that good way that comes from a day of hard work and harder GS. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages. A few texts from old Academy friends who'd seen clips of the air show online. A missed call from my mother, probably just checking in. And an email from Hayes with the schedule for next week's training exercises. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, replaying the day in my mind. The look on my father's face when the general spoke. The feeling of lighting the afterburners and punching through the sky. The awkward but real hug in the parking lot. It all felt surreal, like it had happened to someone else. But it hadn't. It had happened to me. And somehow, against all odds, I'd made it through. I thought about calling my mother back, but it was late, and I didn't know what I'd say. So instead, I got up and walked to the small shelf where I kept my grandfather's watch. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, the cracked leather band soft under my fingers. He'd worn this every day of his life, through war and peace, through joy and loss. And he'd given it to me not because I'd earned it, but because he believed I would. I strapped it onto my wrist, the fit loose but comfortable. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the base, at the flight line where my jet waited in the darkness. Tomorrow there'd be another mission, another briefing, another flight. The work never stopped. But tonight, just for tonight, I let myself feel something I hadn't allowed in a long time. Not pride, not vindication, just peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've finally stopped fighting ghosts and started living the life you built with your own hands. I stood there for a long time, watching the stars emerge one by one in the desert sky, thinking about my grandfather and the sky he loved but never flew in. Thinking about my father and the bridge we'd started to build. Thinking about the jet waiting for me on the flight line and the endless sky beyond. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was reaching for something just out of grasp. I felt like I'd arrived. Not at an ending, but at a beginning. The kind that only comes after you've flown through the storm and found yourself still airborne on the other side. Tomorrow I'd fly again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Because that's what pilots do. We fly. Not to escape, not to prove, just because the sky is there and we are called to meet it. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The call came 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning while I was running pre-flight checks on a training sortie. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the screen. Mom. I frowned. She never called during duty hours. Never called without texting first, actually. I excused myself from the flight line and answered. Mom? Hey, sweetheart, her voice sounded strained, thin. I hate to bother you at work. You're not bothering me, I said, already feeling my pulse quicken. What's wrong? She took a breath, and I could hear the tremor in it. It's your father. He's in the hospital. My stomach dropped. What happened? He had a heart attack this morning. At the shop. One of his mechanics called the ambulance. They got him to St. Vincent's, and he's stable now, but, her voice broke. The doctors want to keep him for observation. Run some tests. I was already walking toward the operations building, my mind racing through logistics. When did this happen? Around 8. I've been here since 9. Kyle's on his way from Bozeman. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I'll get there as soon as I can. Mom, is he? I paused, not sure how to ask. Is he going to be okay? They think so, she said, but I could hear the fear underneath. They said it was mild, whatever that means. But Danny, he's been asking for you. Those words hit me harder than any G-force. He's asking for you. My father, who'd spent most of my life acting like I was an inconvenience, was asking for me. I'll be there, Mom, I said. Give me a few hours to sort out travel. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Thank you. I'll see you soon, I said, and hung up. The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I found Hayes in his office and explained the situation. He didn't hesitate. Go, he said. Family emergency leave approved. I'll reassign your training slots. Thank you, sir, I said. He waved me off. Just keep me posted. And Brennan, he added as I turned to leave. I hope your old man's all right. Me too, sir, I said. Me too. I threw essentials into a duffel bag, grabbed my car keys, and headed for the gate. The drive from Nellis to Billings was 14 hours straight through, longer if I stopped for more than gas and coffee. I didn't stop. I drove through the desert as the sun climbed high, then through Utah as it arced overhead, then into Wyoming as it began to sink. The landscape changed from barren tan to scrub brush to rolling hills, and I barely noticed any of it. My mind kept looping back to the last time I'd seen my father. The hug in the parking lot. The stiff way he'd held me, like he was remembering how. The way he'd said take care of yourself, Danny, like maybe he actually meant it. And now he was lying in a hospital bed, and I was racing north to see him, not sure what I'd find when I got there. I called my mother twice during the drive. Both times she said the same thing. He's resting. Stable. The doctors are running tests. Both times I heard the exhaustion in her voice, the kind that comes from sitting in a waiting room chair for hours with nothing to do but worry. I arrived at St. Vincent's just after midnight. The hospital was quiet, the lobby dim except for the reception desk where a tired-looking nurse directed me to the cardiac unit on the 3rd floor. I took the elevator, my reflection in the steel doors showing a woman in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes shadowed with fatigue. My mother was in the waiting area, curled up in a chair with a hospital blanket draped over her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, older. When she saw me, she stood quickly, the blanket falling to the floor. "Danny," she said, her voice cracking. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, and I held her, feeling her shake. "He's okay, Mom," I said, though I had no idea if that was true. "He's going to be okay." Kyle appeared from around the corner, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He looked as tired as I felt. "Hey," he said, handing one of the cups to our mother. "When did you get in?" "Just now," I said. "How is he?" "Asleep," Kyle said. "They've got him on medication and monitors. Doctor said the blockage was partial, not complete. They're talking about putting in a stent tomorrow morning." I nodded, processing the medical jargon. "Can I see him?" My mother glanced at the nurse's station. "Visiting hours are over, but they've been letting us go in one at a time." "I'll ask." She walked over and spoke quietly to the nurse, a young woman with kind eyes who glanced at me and nodded. The nurse led me down the hallway, past rooms with closed doors and beeping machines, and stopped outside room 314. "He's been in and out," she said softly. "Try not to stay too long. He needs rest." "I understand," I said. "Thank you." She pushed the door open, and I stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the monitors and a small lamp in the corner. My father lay in the bed, eyes closed, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Wires ran from his chest to machines that beeped softly, tracking his heartbeat. And 4 lines snaked from his arm to a bag hanging on a metal pole. He looked vulnerable, smaller than I remembered, his face pale against the white pillows. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, not sure if I should wake him or just sit there. His hand rested on top of the blanket, and I noticed how weathered it was, the knuckles scarred, the nails permanently stained with grease no amount of scrubbing could remove. Those hands had built engines, fixed transmissions, held my mother on their wedding day. Those hands had never held mine, not that I could remember. I reached out slowly and covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm, rough. He stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering. "Danny," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. "I'm here." His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then finding me. "You came," he said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. "Of course I came," I said. He tried to sit up, but I gently pressed his shoulder back down. "Don't," I said. "Just rest." He settled back into the pillows, his breathing a little labored. "They said it was my heart," he said, like he still couldn't believe it. "Said I need to slow down." I smiled faintly. "Sounds like good advice." He looked at me, really looked, his eyes searching my face. "I thought I had more time," he said quietly. "More time for what?" I asked. "To fix things," he said. "With you." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad, you don't have to," he cut me off, his grip on my hand surprisingly strong. "No, I do. I've been thinking about it ever since that air show. About all the years I wasted being stubborn. Being blind." He paused, swallowing hard. "When I saw you in that jet, when I realized what you'd become, I felt," he struggled for the word. Ashamed. Not of you. Of myself. For not seeing it sooner. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, that it didn't matter, but that would have been a lie. It did matter. It had always mattered. But sitting there in that hospital room, watching my father fight for words he'd never learned to say, I realized something. Holding on to the hurt wasn't protecting me. It was just keeping me tethered to the past. You're seeing it now, I said finally. That's what matters. He shook his head slightly. I should have seen it when you were 14 and wanted to work on cars. Should have seen it when you joined the Civil Air Patrol. Should have seen it when you got accepted to the academy. But I was too caught up in my own ideas of what you should be. His voice wavered. I'm sorry, Danny. I'm so damn sorry. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I forgive you, Dad, I said, and realized as I said it that I meant it. Not because he deserved it, necessarily, but because I needed to. Because carrying that weight was exhausting, and I was tired of flying with it strapped to my back. He closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his weathered cheek. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. We sat in silence for a while, his hand in mine, the machines beeping their steady rhythm. Eventually, his breathing deepened, and I knew he'd fallen asleep. I stayed a little longer, watching him, this man who'd loomed so large in my life and yet somehow never really knew me. I wondered what would have been different if he'd said these things years ago. If he'd hugged me when I left for the academy. If he'd called after I made captain. But I pushed those thoughts away. What ifs didn't change anything. Only what came next mattered now. I stood quietly, tucking his hand back under the blanket, and walked to the door. The nurse was at the station, charting on a computer. He's asleep, I said. She nodded. That's good. Sleep is the best thing for him right now. I rejoined my mother and Kyle in the waiting area. My mother looked up anxiously. How is he? Tired, I said. But he seems okay. We talked. She smiled, relief washing over her face. Good. That's good. We stayed at the hospital until 3 a.m, taking turns dozing in the uncomfortable chairs, checking on my father every hour. By dawn, the cardiologist made his rounds and confirmed the plan. They'd do the procedure that afternoon, inserting a stent to open the blocked artery. It was routine, he assured us, low risk. My father would be home in a few days. During the procedure, we sat in the surgical waiting room, a sterile space with outdated magazines and a television playing morning news on mute. My mother clutched a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Kyle paced, restless energy burning off his nerves. I sat still, hands folded, breathing steady. I'd learned long ago how to wait. How to stay calm when there was nothing to do but trust the people doing the work. 2 hours later, the surgeon appeared, still in his scrubs. The procedure went well, he said. We placed the stent successfully. He should make a full recovery with lifestyle modifications and medication. My mother nearly collapsed with relief. Kyle exhaled hard. I just nodded, feeling the tension I'd been holding finally start to unravel. Thank you, doctor, I said. Can we see him? In about an hour, once he's out of recovery, the surgeon said. He'll be groggy, but you can sit with him. When they finally let us back, my father was awake but drowsy, his words slurred from the anesthesia. He smiled when he saw us, a loopy, unguarded smile I'd never seen before. Hey, family, he said. His speech was thick, slow. Did they fix me? They fixed you, my mother said, taking his hand. You're going to be just fine. He looked at me, his eyes glassy. Danny, you stayed. I nodded. I stayed. Good, he murmured. That's real good. Then he drifted back to sleep, and we let him rest. Over the next 2 days, I stayed in Billings, sleeping on my mother's couch and spending most of my waking hours at the hospital. My father improved steadily, his color returning, his strength coming back. The doctors talked about diet changes, exercise, stress reduction. My mother took notes like she was studying for a final exam, determined to keep him healthy. On the third day, as I sat with him while he ate bland hospital oatmeal, he said out of nowhere, "Tell me about the deployment. The one the general mentioned." I looked up from my phone, surprised. "You really want to know?" "Yeah," he said. "I do." So I told him. About the heat and the dust and the endless patrols. About the ground teams we supported and the close calls that came with the job. About the day we lost a Humvee to an IED and how I'd flown cover while they evacuated the wounded. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't dramatize it either. I just told him the truth, the way I'd lived it. He listened without interrupting, his oatmeal forgotten, his eyes locked on mine. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I had no idea." "I know," I said gently. "But now you do." He nodded slowly. "Your grandfather would have been so proud." I smiled. "I like to think so." "He would have been proud of you too, Dad. For apologizing. For trying." My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I don't deserve that kind of credit," he said. "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm giving it to you anyway." The day before I had to drive back to Nellis, my father was discharged. We helped him into the house, my mother fussing over pillows and blankets, Kyle hovering nearby in case he stumbled. My father waved us all off, grumbling about being treated like an invalid, but there was no real heat in it. He was just glad to be home. That evening, as the sun set over Billings, I found him sitting on the back porch, staring out at the yard. I joined him, settling into the chair beside him. "How you feeling?" I asked. "Tired," he admitted. "But better." "Good," I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the cicadas start their evening song. Then he spoke, his voice low. "I called the VA today. Asked about setting up a scholarship fund. For kids who want to join the military but can't afford it. In your grandfather's name." I turned to look at him, surprised. "Dad, that's what he would have wanted," my father said. "To help kids like you. Kids who want to reach." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't try to hide them. "That's a really good thing, Dad." "Thank you." He reached over and squeezed my shoulder, awkward but sincere. "You've given me a lot to think about, Danny. About what matters. About who I want to be in whatever time I have left." "You've got plenty of time," I said. "Just take care of yourself." He smiled faintly. "I will. And you take care up there in that jet." "Always do," I said. The next morning, I packed my duffel and said my goodbyes. My mother cried, as always, but this time my father walked me to the car. He moved slowly, still recovering, but he was steady. At the driver's door, he pulled me into a hug, a real one this time, his arms strong around me. "I love you, kid," he said, his voice rough. Even when I didn't show it. "I know, Dad," I said, hugging him back. "I love you too." As I drove away, I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway with my mother, waving until I turned the corner and they disappeared from sight. The drive back to Nevada felt different this time. Lighter somehow. Like I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. When I pulled through the gate at Nellis, the guard checked my ID and waved me through. "Welcome back, Captain," he said. "It's good to be back," I said, and meant it. Because as much as I loved my family, as much as the reconciliation mattered, this was where I belonged. In the sky. In the cockpit. In the place where I'd built myself into something stronger than the girl who'd left Billings all those years ago. I reported to Hayes the next morning, and he listened to my update about my father, nodding thoughtfully. "Glad he's okay," he said. "Take whatever time you need if things change." "Thank you, sir," I said. "But I'm ready to get back to work." He smiled. Good. Because we've got a new training cycle starting Monday, and I need my best pilot sharp. Yes, sir, I said. I'll be ready. And I was. Because that's what pilots do. We show up. We fly. We push through the fear and the doubt and the weight of everything we carry. We meet the sky on its terms, again and again, until the day we can't anymore. And when that day comes, we'll have lived a life that mattered. A life we chose. A life we earned one flight at a time. 6 months passed like a training exercise, structured and purposeful. I flew missions, ran drills, mentored younger pilots fresh out of flight school. The rhythm of military life continued, steady and demanding. My father called every Sunday, awkward at first, then gradually more comfortable. We talked about the shop, about my flights when I could discuss them, about nothing and everything. My mother sent care packages, cookies and socks and notes written in her careful handwriting. In November, my squadron got deployment orders. 3 months in the Persian Gulf, carrier operations supporting regional security. I called home the night before we shipped out. My father answered on the second ring. "Hey, Danny," he said, his voice warm. "I'm deploying tomorrow," I said. "Wanted to let you know." There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing, processing. "How long?" 3 months, give or take. Another pause. "You be careful out there." "I will, Dad. I promise." My mother got on the line, her voice tight with worry but trying to stay strong. "We'll be praying for you every day," she said. "I know, Mom. Thank you." She sniffled. "Come home safe, sweetheart." "Always do," I said, echoing the words my grandfather had once told me. The deployment was intense, long hours and constant operations, but it was what I'd trained for. Every catapult launch off the carrier deck, every arrested landing in the dark, every mission brief and debrief, it all mattered. I sent emails home when I could, short updates that said I was safe, I was fine, I was doing my job. My father responded with equally short messages. "Proud of you. Stay sharp. Come home soon." When we finally returned to Nellis in February, the desert had never looked so good. I called home from the tarmac, still in my flight suit, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. "We're back," I said when my mother answered. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "Your father's been watching the news every night." "Is he there?" "Hold on," she said. A moment later, my father's voice came through. "Danny?" "Hey, Dad. I'm stateside." His voice cracked slightly. "Welcome home, kid." "Thanks," I said. "It's good to be back." He cleared his throat. "When can you get leave?" "Couple weeks, probably." "Why?" "Because your mother and I want to come visit," he said. "See where you work. See your jet. If that's okay." I felt something warm spread through my chest, something that felt like belonging. "Yeah, Dad," I said. "That'd be great." They arrived 3 weeks later, driving down from Montana in my father's truck. I met them at the base gate and gave them the full tour. The flight line, the hangars, the operations center. My father asked questions, real questions, about the aircraft systems and maintenance schedules. My mother took pictures of everything, beaming with pride. When we reached my jet, parked in its usual spot, my father walked around it slowly, running his hand along the fuselage. "Beautiful machine," he said quietly. "You take good care of her?" "Every day," I said. He nodded, satisfied. That evening, we had dinner at the same Italian restaurant we'd gone to after the air show. But this time, there was no awkwardness, no heavy silences. We talked and laughed, and when the waitress asked if we were celebrating anything, my mother said, "Just being together." Before they left the next morning, my father pulled me aside in the parking lot of their hotel. "I've been working on something," he said, reaching into his truck and pulling out a wooden box. He handed it to me, and I opened it carefully. Inside was a hand-carved model of an F-18, detailed and perfect, sitting on a small wooden stand. An engraved plate on the base read Captain Danielle Brennan, Phoenix. "Dad," I whispered, running my fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you make this?" "Been working on it since I got out of the hospital," he said. "Figured it was time I built something for you. Something that mattered." I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. "It's perfect. Thank you." He pulled me into a hug. "You've given me more than you know, Danny," he said. "A reason to be better. A reason to be proud." I hugged him back, holding tight. "I'm proud of you too, Dad." When they drove away, I stood in the parking lot holding that wooden jet, feeling the weight of it, the care that had gone into every cut and curve. I carried it back to my quarters and placed it on my desk, right next to my grandfather's watch. 2 generations, 2 men who'd shaped me in different ways. One who'd always believed, and one who'd learned to. That night, I sat on my porch watching the stars emerge, thinking about the path that had brought me here. The girl who'd wanted to work on cars. The cadet who'd nearly quit. The pilot who'd flown through combat and came home changed. The daughter who'd finally made peace with her father. All of it, every struggle and triumph, had led to this moment. To a life lived on my own terms. To a sky that was mine to claim. The next morning, I reported for duty as the sun broke over the mountains. Park was already in the ready room, reviewing flight plans. "Morning, Phoenix," he said. "Morning," I replied, pouring coffee. "We've got a full day ahead." "Good," I said, settling into my chair. I wouldn't have it any other way. Because this was who I was. Not defined by where I came from or who doubted me along the way. Defined by the choices I made, the flights I flew, the people I protected. Defined by the courage to keep reaching, even when the sky seemed impossibly far away. My father had mocked me once in front of a general, thinking I was less than I was. But the general knew better. And now, finally, so did my father. Not because I proved him wrong, but because I'd given him the chance to see me clearly. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.